I want to know from you, what does the Torah, the Holy Book, tell about the existence of Israel and the elimination of Israel, if I can say that? Is there anything in Torah telling about what is going on right now?
Our teaching is that, I think I mentioned it to you earlier, that the Torah tells us that we will have a place to live, and that place will be the Holy Land, Palestine, but only subject to certain conditions. I mentioned this earlier.
Yes.
These conditions are sadly not fulfilled, and it says in the Torah that we would be sent into exile. In exile, we are taught we have to be loyal citizens of the countries in which we live. We are not allowed, under oath, to try and form a state of our own. And we are warned that if we try to go against this teaching, if we transgress this teaching, there would be very dire consequences, very serious consequences. The whole formation of Zionism and the Zionist state is a transgression of this duty which the Torah has put on the Jewish people. And because of this, it is certain that it will not succeed, because the Torah says quite clearly that something which is forbidden, it will not succeed. And it is only through Zionism that there has been such a lot of suffering in Palestine in the last 100 years. And this again is foretold in the Torah. If you transgress the requirement, the oath that has been placed upon you not to try and form a state of your own, there will be terrible consequences. And we see the consequences. The so-called Zionist state is supposed to be a safe haven for the Jewish people. It's the most dangerous place in the world for Jewish people. Sadly, it is the only place in the world since the Second World War where Jews have died in their thousands, tens of thousands. Why? Only because of Zionism. And that is, we are terribly concerned with the suffering of the Palestinian people, but at the same time, it has been a tragedy for the Jewish people, and this is foretold in the Torah.
What is the solution that is taught in the Torah?
The solution for us is not to take action. As I mentioned, our solution is to teach the right approach and to pray. What will transpire, we don't know. There could be a peaceful solution. There could be a violent solution. We don't know. We leave that to the hands of the Almighty. And we've got a saying that the heart of kings and princes is in the hands of the Almighty God. And whatever the politicians and the various powers to be, the powers that be, decide, that is the idea that will have been put into their mind by the Almighty, and we have to see and accept what will take place. We cannot do more than that.
Okay. What's your comment about what Mr. Bush said, that Israel should be the state of the Jewish people?
Well, this follows on, of course, what we mentioned earlier, that the support that the United States give the state of Israel, but it also revolves around the fact that the Zionists have succeeded, or tried to succeed, to delude the world into thinking that they represent the Jewish people. So in the eyes of the world, in the eyes of Mr. Bush, Zionism and Judaism are one thing. And therefore he says, well, the Zionist state is a Jewish state. But of course it's not so. It's a Zionist state, it's not a Jewish state. The Jewish identity is something which has been maintained over centuries, over thousands of years, by people who have kept up the Jewish Torah, the Jewish way of life, even though sadly most Jews are not religious nowadays, but the only reason they know that they are Jewish is because they can trace their forebears not very many generations back, maybe 2 or 3 generations back, to people who are observant religious Jews. Beyond that, let me put it the other way around. If, say, there were Jewish people who left their religion 500-600 years ago, their grandchildren are no longer aware that they are Jewish. So the only way the Jewish identity was maintained is by maintaining the Jewish way of life. The Zionists came along with a new idea. We'll give you a new identity. We'll give you a nationalistic identity. And they delude the world into thinking that this is also a Jewish identity, but it's not. It's a Zionist identity, which is not a Jewish identity. It's something different. So Mr. Bush is only compounding the wrong impression that Zionism and Judaism are one and the same thing, and they're not.
Rabbi Cohen, now Israel is having a certain, I don't know the exact word, training, military training in Golan Heights, and it had last month also a very big training, military training. If there is a war in the near future, if Israel makes certain war in the near future with Syria or with Lebanon, with Hezbollah, what do you think the result will be? Is it the real destruction of the Jews, as certain predictions say, according to Torah or to Islam or something?
One day, the Zionist state will cease to exist. How and when, we don't know.
But I want to know also the procedures and the consequences on the Jews themselves. Yeah.
An ideal situation would be that the Zionists themselves realize their folly, realize their mistake, and say, I always say, there's one statement which could be made, and overnight all violence would stop.
Mm-hmm.
And that statement, if it was made by the people who had the power to make it, would be, we are prepared to sit down and discuss the peaceful dissolution of the Zionist state. Imagine Mr. Olmert and his government saying that. It's a dream, but imagine they said that. Violence would stop overnight.
Yes.
There would be no more violence. I can guarantee that. Okay, if they really mean what they say, everybody would sit down. It would take a lot of effort, tremendous effort. They would have to give over power to a third party.
Yeah.
They'd have to. The Zionist dream would finish. The Zionist idea would finish. There would have to be the compensation for the Palestinians. There would have to be a new form of regime in Palestine. And Jewish people could carry on living in Palestine in such a situation. No reason why not. I don't see any reason why, and I don't believe that the Palestinians themselves will not want to live together with the Jews as long as they're not suppressed, they're not oppressed and suppressed. If there's going to be a military confrontation, who knows? We don't know what will happen. They saw in Lebanon, and even now in Gaza, that they're not the super military power that they've made, that the invincible military power that they want to give the world the impression that they are. They cannot. And it would be very, very tragic if there was a military confrontation. There would be a tremendous lot of loss of life on both sides. What the result would be at this point in time, one cannot tell. It could be that they would still muddle through and carry on, or not. We don't know. And again, I often say, my prayer is that the worst that should happen to the Jewish people in Palestine now is that they should have to leave, but be alive.
Yeah. So
That should be the worst. But who knows? We don't know.
so in other words, you are telling that you don't agree about the solution of two states.
No, you see, again, and let me preface what I'm going to say. We are a religious group, and by saying religious group, we try to do what is the will of the Almighty. If we can do that, and that's only the ideal, if we can do that, we can do it. Otherwise, we leave it over to the Almighty. We leave it to God to do. We can't bargain with God's wishes. There should not be a Zionist state. That is the ideal. If we can't achieve that, then we can't do anything. We have to leave it to the Almighty. To start saying, well, we'll be pragmatic, we'll be practical, that's not for us. That's for the politicians, and that's for what the Almighty will put in their minds. Now, let me get back to the two-state solution. We cannot positively propose a two-state solution because it wouldn't be right, both from a religious point of view and from a humanitarian point of view. From a religious point of view, we're not allowed to have a state of our own. Whether it's a half a state or a whole state, it makes no difference. So it would still not be acceptable. From a humanitarian point of view, it still also would not be acceptable because you would end up with a situation where the robbers have succeeded halfway. You understand what I mean?
Yeah.
If robbers break into a house and the owners want the house back, and somebody comes along and says, let's make peace, we'll give you half a house back, justice has not been done.
Yes.
So it wouldn't be right from a humanitarian point of view. So we wouldn't accept it. We couldn't, the two states. The one, I don't know when you were going to ask me about the one-state
Yes.
solution. The one-state solution, again, it depends how it's set up. It depends to what degree the justice is done to the Palestinians. It's got to be, for us to feel happy about it, it would have to be, go back to square one, where the Jewish people themselves have no authority because they are in exile. Even in Palestine, they're in exile. If there is a one-state set up and the Jews are allowed to live there as they're allowed to live in other countries, that would be fine. But how that would come about, we don't know.
I want to know certain facts about Natudi Carta. Can you tell me what is the number of its members? How was it established, and its basic aims and so on?
Right. First of all, let me explain one thing which people don't realize. Naturi Carta is not a formal group, not a formal organization. The Naturi Carta is the name of a philosophy, the name of the Orthodox Jewish opposition to Zionism. Really, the truth of the matter is that Orthodox, authentic Judaism opposes Zionism. But because so many people are misled nowadays, those Jews who are prepared to get up and fight or show their opposition to Zionism have become known as Naturi Carta. Why have they become known as Naturi Carta? The word Naturi Carta means guardians of the city. It was based on a story that we are taught in our teachings, how a wise man once came to a city and asked, who are your guardians? Who are the Naturi Carta? And the people there pointed to the soldiers, and the wise man said, they're not the guardians of the city, they are the destroyers of the city. The guardians of the city are the wise men, the people who teach you how to live a good life and to live a proper life. That's what it's based on. So when Zionism first raised its head in Palestine, there were an indigenous Jewish population there before who had been living there for years,
Yes.
with the Palestinians, and they were tremendously alarmed at the new development, and they wanted to set up an opposition, a religious and a practical opposition to Zionism. And the phrase or the name Neturei Karta developed. That was going back to the 1920s approximately, and that's how the word Neturei Karta developed. So when you ask me how many members, it's really like saying how many people within the Jewish nation oppose Zionism.
Yes, something like that.
Right. The answer is, I cannot answer. We don't know. All I can say is this, that within the Jewish people, sadly, most of them are not Orthodox nowadays. We hope this will change. But you have a percentage, 5-10% who are Orthodox. And even among Orthodox, you've got different types of Orthodoxy. But I would say people who look like us, for want of a better, of those people who look like us, you will find that the majority of them
Yes.
you will find that the majority do not approve of the state of Israel. By that I mean that if the state of Israel came to an end, they would be not upset in the slightest.
Mm-hmm.
They don't recognize, they don't really attach an importance to the state of Israel. They don't teach their children the modern form of Hebrew which is taught in the state of Israel. Those who live in Palestine, in Israel, don't send their sons to the army. That's the majority of the Orthodox group. But not many of them are prepared to stand up publicly and state their position like we do. That is where you get the Neturei Karta. Because of a lot of pressure, peer pressure and so on, they're not prepared. But the majority do not approve. I would call them non-Zionists rather than anti-Zionists, non-Zionists. You do have a small vociferous minority who are very strongly pro-Zionist. You see them on television, those people who settle in the settlers in the West Bank and so on.
Yes.
But they're a very small minority, and these are people who've gone away from the right path. They have been attracted to the nationalistic idea of Zionism, and they've bolted it onto Judaism.
Mm-hmm.
But they're an aberration. They are a mutation. They've gone away from the correct Jewish path. So that's the answer that I can give.
But do you think that this pro-Zionism movement is going to control the majority of the Jews, especially in Israel? You told me, Rabbi Cohen, that there are certain Jews in Israel that do not agree with the Zionism thoughts.
Can I interrupt you?
Yes.
It's very bad for me. My back is. I must sit on a different chair.
Sure.
It's got to be a high. I should really not sat down on there at all.
No.
If I sit on an armchair.
No problem.
Can I trouble you to bring that down? That
Yes.
chair was here before. I'm sorry to trouble you if you can bring it down. It will spoil his picture, I'm afraid, because it's going to. That's more comfortable for me. I think it needs to be raised. Yeah. Okay, that's better.
Okay.
Okay, now that's better, Bobby. Thank you. Where were we up to? You were asking me about whether they're going to control.
Yes.
They have a strong voice, but I doubt whether they will. I think reason will come to a fore. I think reason will succeed. because I think there are more and more people, even within the state of Israel, who realize the basic fallacy, the basic wrongness of the state. And I think there's a good chance that they will not be able to control it.
Now, after you leave Doha, where are you going? What is your future plans? Is there any special project in your mind to distribute this thinking more and more?
Well, we attend, you asked me a bit earlier on in the interview what we do about talking to Jewish people, and we find that we do as much as we can, but we spend a lot of our time talking to non-Jewish people, going out to pro-Palestinian sympathizers. I mean, that's why we came to Qatar to speak to have interview. My colleague Rabbi Wise had an interview on Al Jazeera, and we met the Sheikh Qaradawi yesterday, and we do this, and we've got all the time we have events taking place, conferences, especially now there are conferences and events taking place in connection with the 60th anniversary of the formation of the Zionist state.
Yes, okay.
And we attend events which like this, but all the time we attend events where we can spread our message, and the idea there is to, because although we can't actually do anything about the Zionist state, but we can come out and say, please don't confuse Jews and Zionists. Don't blame Jews for Zionism. Although Zionists are mostly Jews, but don't blame the Jewish people as such, or the Jewish religion for Zionism. By this we hope to achieve two objectives. Number one, we feel that Zionism and what it has done is a blot and a stain on the name of the Jewish people. The way they've treated the Palestinians is a tragedy beyond description. And we want to, and we consider this a profanation of God's name, because we maintain that we are here to do God's will, and if we do something which is against God's will, this causes a profanation of God's name. So we are anxious to try and remove to some degree this stain against the blot on the name of the Jewish people. And the other thing is that because Zionism has produced a confrontation between Arab and Jew, and confrontation has produced violence.
Yes.
By going out and showing that not all Jews are Zionists, that Judaism and Zionists are two different things, we are reducing the possibility of confrontation, and we are reducing to some degree the possibility of violence. And so we do this as much as we can. And what we're planning to do, well, we have a number of things. All the time there are new events taking place which we try to attend and go on and spread our message.
You are based in London, in UK.
I personally am
based in UK. How do you connect with your colleagues in other parts of the world?
Well, you know, nowadays communication, the world is a small place. We communicate by telephone, by email.
I mean your activities.
Well, again, we see, I've come from the UK and my colleagues have come from the United States. So when there's an activity that takes place, we converge, we meet up together.
The last question is about what you just have mentioned, Rabbi Cohen. It's about celebrations of establishment or announcement of Israeli state. What is your comment and what is your message? What do you say?
Well, we don't consider it a celebration at all. We can consider it a time for mourning, a time for for self introspection to show what wrong has been done, how showing up the tragedy, or I think you call it the Nakba, which I believe means a disaster or a tragedy. Yes, and we would also call it a Nakba. It was the one. But we say, incidentally, that the Nakba didn't take place in 1948. It took place in 1917, when the Balfour Declaration was made. That was a basic wrong. It was a basic event which was started off the chain of events which caused such a lot of tragedy and bloodshed, both among Palestinians and Jews. And therefore, this is an occasion for mourning, not an occasion for rejoicing. But even in an occasion of mourning, one has to always have hope and prayer, and we pray constantly that this mutation, this cancer, if you like, of Zionism will come to an end. We pray that it will come to an end speedily and peacefully, and that Jew and Arab and Jew and Muslim should be able to live peacefully along with each other as they have done for centuries.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cohen. It pleases me, this interview pleases me, and I'm very proud that I've met you here in Doha. I hope I see you again and again in certain occasions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is going to be printed in the paper, is it?
Yes.
But it's in Arabic.
In Arabic, yes.
In Arabic, yes. You won't have an English translation. No.
Unfortunately.
Never mind. Where are you from originally?
I am from South Lebanon.
Ah, yes, you said from Lebanon, that's right.
I'm from the village, which is Fatima Gate Inn.
Really?
Yeah, my house is just next to Fatima Gate.
Really?
That's why when you were showing me the
Yes,
paper.
I went with them. We all went to Beirut, and I went away earlier.
Yes.
So I didn't go to Fatima Gate, but the others were there. There's a photo of them
Yes.
standing on the Lebanese side.
This is just next to my house. That's why I was.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. Bye now.